Welcome to the Courageous Nerd YouTube channel. This is Connor back with another interview. Joining me is actor Alphonso Romero Jones, who stars as John Ellis in the new Netflix series Grand Army. We talk all about the show and the process of landing the role, as well as some of Alfonso's wider creative passions. If you enjoy this interview or any of the others on the channel, please be sure to like and subscribe. Great, so welcome and thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you for having me.
Great. And so you play John Ellis on the new Netflix series Grand Army. And I guess, in your opinion, especially in 2020, how timely are the issues explored in the show?
The issues are very timely, and it's honestly surprising that we're still here.
Hmm,
A year ago, when we were shooting this, it was already timely,
sure.
and now it's like nothing has changed, and it even seems more important for this show to come out, for these messages to be heard.
Right. And so I was reading that Katie Capiello's play Slut is the basis, at least for season one of Grand Army. So how close of an adaptation would you say the show is to the play?
The show compared to the play
Hmm,
is the closest relation to that is in Joey's storyline. Uh,
sure.
Her storyline basically mirrors the play, and then it explodes into this whole universe when they add the other characters like Sid and Jason and Owen, and you get and Layla, and you get those storylines as well as Joey's storyline. So it
Hmm.
does a great job at adapting the play while also giving you something new to experience as well.
Right, and Grand Army also has quite a large ensemble cast. And how was your experience of working alongside them?
It was really a family environment, and
Sure.
I think because we were all, most of us, it was our first time being outside of the country, living on our own for the first time.
Sure.
So a lot of us had each other to lean on, and that ended up developing this chemistry between all of us that really made it a family environment. So being on set was always a bunch of fun. It was always jokes or games. It's always something happening.
Great. And I guess, at least at the time of when we're doing this recording, the show is still relatively new. It's only really just come out. So how would you describe your character John, and how similar or different do you think you are to him?
John is a senior basketball student at
Hmm,
Grand Army, and he's also the leader of the Black Student Union, which doesn't make him your average jock.
sure.
Uh, he lives in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, with his mom and works part time at Target. And he has a little thing for Dom. And I think where I am more similar to John is when I was in high school, I had like the same lover boy tendencies. I was a leader, and we didn't have a Black Student Union, but I can compare it to when I was in my school orchestra. I took it on myself to be the backbone of the musical group because I was there. I was the longest tenured member at one point. So
Right.
I pretty much felt like it was my duty to make sure that everyone who came in there got the same experience that I got when I first joined into the orchestra. So I could relate to that,
Hmm,
and I could relate to that in that way. But we're also different because John is way more politically active than I ever was at that age.
hmm.
I was just coming into myself at that time. And John knows, he knows his politics. You know, he knows about those things, and he knows how to educate others on them as well. And he's really deep into it. And I appreciate that a lot about about the character and getting to play that character.
Right. And I mean, obviously, just to kind of touch on what you were saying, I guess having that kind of, even if it wasn't the exact experience, but bringing an element of authenticity to it, I'm sure must have helped in trying to imagine what he'd be like, what John would be like. So, and I'm sure that must come across. And I guess just to say, with Netflix being a streaming service, and obviously we're in the age of like binge watching all these shows, would you recommend, because being involved with the story, watching it in one sitting or to take your time with it?
I think you should take your time with it.
Mm,
There's nothing wrong with binging Grand Army, but Grand Army is one of those shows where you could miss something if you stop paying attention for a split second. You could miss
sure.
something. So if you do binge watch it, I suggest that you watch it again so that you could catch something that you didn't catch the last time. But if you do take the breaks, that's fine as well because it's a it's a lot of heavy subject matter, and
Mm,
some need that time to really let it sink in and to fully understand what's going on in the story.
right. And you were kind of mentioning this briefly earlier, but from the time that you spent working on Grand Army, do any like moments stand out in your mind, I guess, in real life or while playing the character?
Um, I think a moment for me was doing the sit-in scene
Sure.
because when's the last time you heard of a high school doing a sit-in?
Mm,
And when I read that in the script that there was going to be a sit-in, it was moving to me because like this is something that generations before us had done and and protest, and now you got these 17-year-olds in a high school doing a sit-in. And so that being able to play that out meant a lot to me because like I get to be the guy that's on the soapbox really laying it on the line for the student body.
right. And I was also reading actually that you were once playing young Simba in The Lion King on Broadway. So obviously you would have an acting and performing background going back a few years. And when did you decide, I guess, that acting was the path you wanted to take?
I think acting kind of chose me
Mm,
because I was always a performer as a kid. Like I danced and I sang and I played drums in church. And my mom would do these plays at my church that I'd be in. But when it came to actually doing it seriously, it kind of happened on accident. Being in the Lion King, I really didn't intend to be young Simba. I was
mm,
actually going to the audition for my sister. She wanted to be young Nala, and I was
right.
emotionally supporting her by going along with it too. And then 2 years later, now I'm on Broadway as young Simba. And then from there, being able to handle that kind of pressure and still perform and get 3 years out of it
Mm,
being on Broadway, it let me know that I'm really I'm destined for something greater. And this is something that I have to hold on to. I can't just let this gift go. I have to pour more into it.
right. And I guess kind of linking um, the stage background with Katie's play. You were in another play of hers called Now That We're Men, and obviously there's like similar social thematic elements in Grand Army and this play. So how important to you is exploring those kind of social themes in your work?
I love work that has social themes
Mm,
because I think that's what needs to be seen. Like it's one thing where when you're doing fantasy work or work that's based off reality but not completely in reality, and then there's another
sure.
thing when you're displaying people's everyday life through art.
Mm,
And I love doing that. Being able to be in Now That We're Men showed me that every time we performed, afterwards we would have talkbacks and people would ask us questions or um, they would want to have conversations with us solely based off the way that we portrayed actual teen male life on stage and how much they appreciated it. And they would want to like talk about things that happened to them in their life. So being able to incorporate that with my gift, so I'm helping people and I'm entertaining people at the same time.
Great. And I guess kind of again on that tangent, back in January, Teen Vogue published an essay you wrote about your childhood and events involving your friend James. And how would you say what you described in the essay has impacted your outlook in adulthood?
Yeah, that I definitely feel like that played a large part into how I live today and how I interact with my friend groups today, how
Mm,
I make new friendships. You know, is it's easier to monitor yourself going forward than it is to think about the things that happened in the past. And in the past, like I said in the essay, like those things, it I didn't know what I was doing, but
sure,
being introduced to Katie and being a part of all her work allowed me to get into that mind frame, I should say, and
sure.
know what was happening then shouldn't have been happening, and it shouldn't happen going forward. And that was a big reason why I actually wrote that essay, because I wanted someone who felt like how I felt, that they were doing the right thing, that they should have been acting that way, or they should have been putting those type of energy out on other people, that they don't have to do that because it's mostly performative.
Right. And I would say another passion of yours creatively would be music. I read that you produce music under the name, and you might have to correct me if I get this wrong, TKP Nook.
Yeah,
Is that
sir.
correct? Yeah. So, and I guess being such a creative person between the acting and the music, how has the pandemic affected or restricted your creativity?
That's actually a great question.
Mm,
Um, the pandemic, well, I like to make music based off my life, how I'm feeling, what's going on. And when the pandemic first hit and we had to stay inside, nothing was really moving around. And it didn't affect me working because I work out of my home studio. But when it came to inspiration, there really wasn't much for a good while. And I found myself in a rut because of the quarantine, doing the same
mm.
thing day and not really being able to be outside and experience and release a little bit. But I've worked my way through that. You know, it's October now, so
Yeah.
I've worked my way through that, and I've found ways to be creative while still in the midst of a pandemic. But in the beginning, it was definitely hard.
Right. And I guess aside from Grand Army, are there any other upcoming projects you'd want to mention or tell people about?
Well, people should always expect new music and more projects on the way. But if you really want to keep up with everything that has to do with me, you can go to my website, www.alphonso.romerojones.com. And that'll
Uh,
have you need there.
Great. And this is actually the last question I've got here. And since the pandemic started, and when I've been doing these interviews, I've asked everyone a version of this question. And it's, what advice would you offer to fans of your work or you personally, for the people kind of living through the pandemic?
Um, I say try to find an outlet.
Mm,
Try to find something to put energy into so that you don't get complacent or stuck. Because it's very easy, like I said, it's very easy to get into a rut in a time like this. And you think that you're restricted or your hands are held behind your back because of a virus. So I would like people to find some type of outlet to pour themselves into when they have free time. So I was doing video games, I was doing music,
mm.
I was watching shows on TV, And I think those are great ways to pass the time.
Yeah, I think that's great advice to give. Obviously, you know, it
Wear a
can,
mask.
yeah, it can be very difficult. I think, you know, obviously having to experience what we're experiencing every day. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, for sure. And wear a mask.